Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we are talking about Star Wars Brotherhood by Mike Chen. I'm so excited to finally be talking about this with you, Sarah, because, whew, what a book.
We could have recorded this episode before any of the Kenobi episodes premiered. However, I think this episode is only enhanced by our viewing of the first 4 by the time that you see this, but 3 by the time that we're recording this, episodes of Kenobi.
Yes. Yeah, because we did plan to record this back in May, but, you know, things happened. Star Wars Celebration got really busy, and
I got sick, but I'm better now.
Yeah, very, very thankfully. I'm actually happy like where we're recording it now. Yeah, because we have some more context between of the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, which makes it all the more exciting. And I feel like as we were going back through the book and picking out notes, we were like, oh my God, that's a connection to Kenobi. Did Mike Chen know? Did he know? Tell us your secrets, Mike. But really, it's just that brilliant of a book where it really taps into the heart and soul of this Brotherhood.
Exactly. And we were also doing Attack of the Clones April for all of April. So we were like really in the Attack of the Clones energy. And then we picked up this book and we were like, yes, more Attack of the Clones energy. But now with this book plus Kenobi, we're getting like the Rotsa side of the energy too. And so it's really just like the best of both worlds here. And the vibing, we're vibing at like a fever pitch right now. Like the energy is really high for the prequels, for Kenobi, for this character and this relationship. And so I am feeling so good about diving into all of the incredible aspects of this book today. If you can't tell, we like it.
Yeah, it was such a time. I am so excited. And speaking of which, we've been doing a lot of stuff here at Friends of the Force. So we went to Celebration. We just put out our Celebration recap episode where we talked all about our weekend in Anaheim, or our week per se, because we were there for a full 7 days. We talked about the first 3 episodes of Kenobi on the podcast feed. And we also uploaded our entire podcast stage panel. So go check out all those things. And speaking of Brotherhood, we had the chance to interview Mike Chen at Celebration. So that interview will be going up a couple of days after this episode drops. So you're getting all the Brotherhood feels this week. And Mike is a brilliant writer. And I'm so happy that we got the chance to talk to him because I could listen to him talk for hours. So stay tuned for that because it's a great time.
Yeah, if you're not somebody who typically listens to the interviews on this podcast, you know, you're just like a book reviews person or whatever, that's okay. But I really, really recommend you listen to this interview because his insights about the Revenge of the Sith novelization, about Anakin, just about these characters are so thoughtful and fun to listen to. And if you loved this book just as much as we did, you will love to hear him talk about it.
Absolutely.
But before we get into our conversation, it's that time once again in our book discussions for our independent bookstore of the week. This is always my favorite thing to do. I love to find new bookstores. I love to share them with you. And I always appreciate your recommendations. If you have a bookstore that is near you or your favorite bookstore, independent bookstore around where you live, please send us an email through our website or tweet at us. I would love to hear them because there are so many bookstores I have never been to, including this awesome bookstore that I get to talk about today. But they are certified amazing, so I'm very excited. They are Foggy Pine Books in Boone, North Carolina. Foggy Pine Books is a queer-owned bookstore. They sell both new and used books for adults and children and literary gifts. They have this great quote that they include on their website from Henry Miller in The Books in My Life. And it says, "A book is not only a friend, it makes friends for you. When you have possessed a book in mind and spirit, you are enriched. But when you pass it on, you are enriched threefold." So
I love that quote.
I thought that was such a nice one because we love to talk about books here. We love to share our love for books on this podcast. And I thought it was so perfect. And when I found this bookstore, I was like, yes, this is the one I get to share this week. And it's also amazing. Like, they are queer owned. It is Pride Month. I thought that was really important. It's important throughout the year, but especially important to highlight this month. Their owner is Max Ruthless, which is a great last name.
Sounds like a bounty hunter name.
Right. Are they a book slinging bounty hunter? I don't know.
Oh, they fire books at people with their blasters. Read. Right.
Exactly.
Love that.
But they say after graduation, there were many jobs and ideas about future career paths, but still their love for books never waned. Max was lucky enough to have made friends with their former boss, Karen Hall Walker, at Black Bear Books. When Karen mentioned she wanted to sell the store, Max had to take the chance to make their dreams come true. So Foggy Pine Books was opened in 2016 and then moved to a larger location in 2018. And they are, surviving and thriving over there. And one thing that I found when I was searching up Foggy Pine Books is that they were featured on the Colbert. What's Colbert's show name? I don't know. I just
The Late Show with Colbert. Yeah.
Thank you. The Late Show. They were included as a Super Bowl ad. So the Late Show with Colbert made a Super Bowl ad in 2021. And instead of promoting a big business, they promoted a small business and they promoted Foggy Pine Books. And they got Tom Hanks to endorse Foggy Pine Books on video. If you look it up, it is hilarious and fantastic. And you should definitely watch it. They have an online store that you can visit them in person. They seem like an awesome, a genuinely really cool, lovely bookstore. And again, this is Foggy Pine Books, a great name, in Boone, North Carolina. So you North Carolina locals that listen to the podcast, here's a bookstore that is closer to you than it is to me. So yeah, that's it. And they're at foggypinebooks.com. Check them out.
Link will be in the description of the episode, so definitely check them out if you're able to order online from them, because there are so many Star Wars books coming out this year, as we learned at Celebration. So you should support local indies because they need your dollars, not giant corporations. So go do that if you're able to, because they appreciate it and they're awesome. Booksellers are the coolest people on earth. Just saying. Also,
I have to give a mighty shout out to the lovely booksellers over at Mysterious Galaxy bookshop, because they were the official bookseller at Star Wars Celebration. And they were located in the Celebration show store, which was a weird place for them to be, but it ended up working out for signings. But they were super friendly. They knew what they were doing. They had good signing procedures, and they were super kind. And I have to do an extra special shout out to Gary, who is their Star Wars expert. He's super, super lovely. And it was wonderful to meet him. So yeah, a special shout out to the lovely folks over at Mysterious Galaxy. They have been featured on a past episode. But I just had to give a special celebration shout out to them. Because we love books. We love booksellers. Be lovely and kind to your local bookseller. And go tell them that you love their Pride displays and or other awesome banned book displays and things that they have going on, because there are nasty people in the world. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Bye.
Also, shout out to the folks at Del Rey. Speaking of Celebration and books, we were there.
I feel like we didn't talk about this on our Celebration episode, but we're going to talk about it now.
Yeah, it was cool that we got to hang out at the booth once again, and we were also there at closing time on Sunday, and I unfortunately spent even more money at the booth helping to buy one of those final books, because I really wanted that Twilight Company patch. And I bought Be More Boba Fett, and they eventually sold all their books from the weekend, so that was pretty cool. So again, booksellers, the goats of our society.
Yeah. And pro tip for Celebration, which I don't think I mentioned on the Celebration episode, if you have the ability to end your weekend at the Del Rey booth, do it. It's really fun.
It's the proper way to end Celebration. Facts only. No notes.
Yeah. There's a lot of cheering, a lot of relief, a lot of good energy. They're just chilling over there in the best way. They're like, yo, our job is done. We love Star Wars. All set.
So yeah, Del Rey's awesome. And speaking of which, thank you, Del Rey, for sending us review copies of Brotherhood, which is what we are talking about today.
Amazing transition.
I'm so excited. I know, right? I worked on that. I've been working on it for 4 weeks. So
good for you.
Hope the listeners appreciated it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So if you have not read Brotherhood, it's been out for about a month now. So we will be talking spoilers on this episode. So if you haven't read it, definitely go do that for yourself now. But if you want the lowdown of the book, we're going to be diving into the onset of the Clone War. Who is Anakin Skywalker? Who is Obi-Wan Kenobi? And who is Anakin and Obi-Wan Kenobi together as a relentless unit, a unit of heroes? The Age of Heroes is saving its best for last here, so we cannot wait.
just grabbing the Rots energy, and they're like, haha, this is the discussion now.
Yeah.
But if you want to know our thoughts on it broadly, as we mentioned up top, we both loved the heck out of this book, and we would highly recommend it to all Star Wars readers. So if you're one of those people that hasn't read it yet, we really, really highly recommend it. And I am speaking for you, Brad, because I know that you agree about that.
Yeah, and I posted a full review on our website, friendsoftheforcepod.com. So if you want to go read that on our blog, it's a great review. Lets you know my thoughts on the book and why I would recommend it for any Star Wars fan. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into this thing.
All right. Well, you owe me one, and not for saving your skin for the 10th time.
9th time. That business on Cato Nemoidia doesn't count.
So when Brotherhood was first announced, I was over the moon because you and I had been anticipating the Obi-Wan Kenobi series for so long, and we were like, oh my gosh, like we are getting Obi-Wan Kenobi publishing. This is so exciting. Like we knew John Jackson Miller had written the Kenobi book way back when, and that's kind of been like I think maybe the biggest Kenobi book to come out. And now like Brotherhood sort of adding itself into that sort of coliseum of Kenobi writing. And, you know, we have Padawan coming this summer. We have Stories of Jedi and Sith, which features some Obi-Wan. So it's just like a really good time to be an Obi-Wan fan. And an Anakin Skywalker fan. And I was just so excited that we were going to be getting this.
You can't forget Master and Apprentice because it all ties in. It all comes together.
Yeah, definitely. That was almost 3 years ago. And even some of what's in this book builds off of Master and Apprentice because Qui-Gon is definitely at the center of it, which we will get into. But how did you feel about the book when it was first announced? And finally, after reading it, like what was your experience and some of the emotions that you felt?
I'll be really honest. I have no idea when it was first announced. Like I don't remember it happening. I know that I had a reaction to it, but
it all blurs together.
It all blurs together, especially in this pandemic. But I do remember the cover being released and me being like, ooh, that's an interesting cover because it actually had Attack the Clones era Hayden and Ewan on the cover. And so I was very fascinated by that. I really liked how soft like the cover looked and its colors. And so I was like, okay, sign me up. And then I just feel like the more we heard about this book and the more we heard from Mike Chen about the book, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm in. And then I read the book and I was like, yeah, I'm in. Count me in. I am a stan of this book.
Yeah, I read this book. I started reading it immediately after I had done my Attack of the Clones rewatch for Attack of the Clones April. And honestly, it could not have been better timed. I was like, wow, what a great way to throw myself into this book because it is taking place minutes, hours, days after Attack of the Clones. So it's really a natural continuation of that story. And that made it even more exciting for me. And like you said, Mike Chen being the writer on this book, and he's such a huge fan of the prequel era. He loves the Rots novelization. He is just a Star Wars fan through and through. And so to see him be the writer on this book after he had written Disturbance and the From a Certain Point of View, Empire Strikes Back, I was like, that's perfect, right? Like he wrote an Anakin story in that. Now he's writing an Anakin Obi-Wan story. And honestly, it just felt like the right fit. And he definitely proved that he was the right fit for this book because honestly, the way that he writes and the things that he focuses on, there's a certain poetry to his writing that almost sort of tapped into the prose of the Revenge of the Sith novelization.
Not and I don't sorta. It totally did. Like he it's clear and it's clear that he has said it, explicitly that he like thinks that the Revenge of the Sith novelization is the best book ever written. Like period. Not the best novelization, not nothing, the best book ever written. So he like holds this book in extremely high regard. And it's clear that he takes influence and takes elements from it and weaves it into his own style, which fits really quite wonderfully with the ideas that Stover puts forward in Revenge of the Sith novelization. So like it's a real stylistic marriage of voices, and I think it's really great.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not by coincidence, and I think as much as this book is a sequel to Attack of the Clones, it is not just a prequel to the Clone Wars. and like Revenge of the Sith, it's a prequel to the Revenge of the Sith novelization. Like I feel like you could read both of these side by side and really get like a really intense emotional experience getting to the heart of this relationship, like the beating heart. And I think he really exposes that in this book. He really gets to the bottom of like what connects these two characters, and maybe not something you would think of on the surface, but really understanding that connection and what's driving that connection and why Anakin and Obi-Wan, no matter how hard they try, they always end up back together. It's like a rubber band. Like you stretch it, and then it snaps back together, right? And so Mike Chen answers that question of why. And also it takes place during wartime. So the galaxy's changing, the Republic's changing, the Jedi are changing. And so it's like, how do these heroes evolve in their new roles that they're taking on, which we're going to talk all about the new roles for Anakin and Obi-Wan. How do they accept those roles while also dealing with like these external forces that are pressing down and like trying to wear them thin? Because the galaxy is like, is cracking, basically. Like we are on the verge of war. It's a really bad war that's going to end with the Empire being birthed.
Right. It's really interesting to read many of the books in Star Wars that we've read over the past couple of years and talk about all these characters who are dealing with difficult interpersonal problems at the same time that they're dealing with a lot of political and worldly pressure, like living in turmoil and understanding how to live in turmoil. And then comparing that to our own lives as people who have been living through a pandemic and who are, living in a world where wars are going on right now and where people are suffering, like there's a lot of like, of course, this is a story of any writer is to, and in allegory to tell us stories that ultimately reflect our own world. But it's always really interesting when it happens in the context of Star Wars. And so I think this idea of like navigating new roles in our lives and understanding how things have changed in a turbulent time while also kind of like accepting our own successes, like really reflects onto what many of us are dealing with over this time, which is just, I think, another success of this book. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to go back to what we were talking about earlier. I would read anything that Mike Chen writes. I look forward to reading his original novels, which have been like on my radar for so long. And I want him to write more prequel stuff. I find his vision of the prequels to be really thoughtful and interesting. And like, I want a merging of the minds between Claudia Gray and Mike Chen.
Ooh, co-author a book.
Co-author a book. Like I want them to like collaborate directly. Like I would be fascinated, or at least for them to just like have a conversation together about ideas about the Force in the prequels. That would be it for me.
You know what I would love? I would love Mike Chen to write a High Republic book.
Ooh, yeah. Just kind of sign me up. I'm in.
I'll buy 10 copies.
Yeah, I got it.
The too long don't read version of our thoughts, I would say, is like this book has everything. It has mystery. It has political intrigue. It has moral and philosophical qualms about like war and violence and good faith and the truth and information and misinformation. It has all that. And it's an action adventure book. You have Asajj Ventress. You have her going up against Anakin and Obi-Wan. Like there's so much packed into this. I'm just like, it keeps getting better and better every page. How does he do it? How does Mike Chen do it? Impressive.
But like also, I also think we need to take into account with your, how does he do it, or how does any of these authors do it? Many times when people write books, they'll like write a book for years or a full year or months and months, and then they'll put it on submission with their agent, and then they'll like shop it around to the publishers, and they'll be like, would you like my book? And the publishers and the editors say like yes or no, right? That's not how Star Wars books work. They have like a very, very tight timeline to write a book. And from what I hear, it's a very intense process of like revision and writing and putting it all together, within the span of less than a year, and oftentimes much less than a year. So how do they do it? Because how do they do it? It's a miracle. It's a miracle that any of these books are as good as they are. And just, I know we're just gushing broadly right now, but like authors, man, they're amazing. They're my superheroes, 110%. Like stories connect us all. I'm just like waxing poetic about stories and storytelling, but like stories connect us all. And I think they're one of the most human and sacred things in this world. And like, man, authors, they're just awesome.
They are
That's
awesome. Yeah.
That's it. That's the tweet. That's the episode. Goodbye, everybody.
Well, I really think we should start diving into this awesome author's awesome work. See, I got the AAA there. We love.
That was good.
A little rough on the landing, but it's okay. Another happy landing.
We got there.
So we're going to dividing this episode up into a couple key parts, 4 parts, you could say. So we're going to talk about the politics of the time because we love a Star Wars politic. We're going to dive into Anakin, what his new roles are, into Obi-Wan, what his new roles are, and then wrapping up the discussion, considering these new roles that these two heroes have taken on, how is their relationship with one another changing as a result of that? And what discoveries, I think, especially on Obi-Wan's end of the spectrum, are they making about that relationship? Because I think Obi-Wan's really the character in this book that makes the realization, because he's the tenured one, he's the master who's sort of looking back on his time as a master and understanding, like, what are the mistakes that I made? Do I have regrets? Would I have done anything differently? And so he's asking those questions. Whereas I think Anakin's sort of coming into his own as a Jedi Knight and as somebody who is going to be taking on a Padawan in Ahsoka Tano very soon. It's just so fascinating that they're at such different points in their life, and we're going to talk all about it. I cannot wait.
And before we jump into it, I just have this thought while we were talking. I feel like Obi-Wan is the character who has the realization for the story's sake, and Anakin is the character who we are shown having realizations for the reader's sake. I hope that makes sense, because Mike talks about how he hopes you walk away from this book like understanding Anakin better. And that's the thing that I really got from this. But at the same time, we have Obi-Wan like really coming to terms with a lot in this novel. And he's really like doing a lot of the story work while us as the reader is getting a lot of this perspective from Anakin. It just makes this book like really interesting because it's firing on a lot of levels here.
Oh, absolutely. So I think that we can dive into part 1.
The shroud of the dark side has fallen. Begun. The Clone War has.
Yeah, so we're in war now.
Oh, darn it. Peacetime was so nice. But was there ever really a peacetime? I don't know.
No.
Not in the Star War. It's called Star War.
Not Star Peace. Yep.
I know.
So there's a really interesting, maybe we should start here. There's a really interesting transition happening that we watch happen throughout the Clone Wars, or if you just watch the movies, like in one thing, in Attack of the Clones, it's one way, and in Revenge of the Sith, it's the other. And that is the Jedi as peacekeepers and monks of a sort, right? These sort of characters who are on the fringes but attached to the Republic. Into military commanders, into people who are explicitly folded into the Grand Army of the Republic. We watch that unfold here, and it is very jarring.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you think of Mace Windu and Attack of the Clones saying, we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers, and now here we are. I love at the end of the book when they're really getting into the thick of it, and Obi-Wan's like, what have we gotten ourselves into? And Anakin's like, body armor, apparently. He's like, I don't need armor. I just run around and be Anakin Skywalker and be totally badass, and I think I look pretty good when I do it. And I love Obi-Wan just kind of being annoyed by that, because that's such a Clone Wars vibe for any Clone Wars watchers, viewers. But what I thought was really striking right at the beginning was how Anakin's having his knighting ceremony, and he doesn't really feel like it's what he thought it would be. Growing up, you think the knighting ceremony is going to be this really significant milestone in your life, and now it just feels like a procedural step to him, like a footnote as part of like a bigger galactic story that's happening, and it just feels super unimportant to him. And I almost drew a little bit of a connection to Reath Silas at the end of Midnight Horizon, where he's getting knighted along with some of his other friends, and he's kind of resisting that. He's like, I'm not with my friends. I'm not on Starlight Beacon. This is all happening too quickly for me. It's not the way I anticipated.
Immediately after tragedy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
So I just thought that was really interesting. Again, not necessarily something I think Mike is trying to connect to, but in some ways, like Anakin and Reath sort of share this experience of jumping into adulthood, not in the way that they intended to, or in the way that they thought was ideal. And I think that's the results of being in wartime. Wartime
Exactly.
really throws you for a loop, and the galaxy is in need of heroes. So there is no time. Time is of the essence. You got to move, and move swiftly.
Well, it's that, but it's also the fact that nobody, when you're in this wartime and everybody's saying move, nobody has any idea or any space in their minds to take a step back and question the path that they're on. Right. And that's the trap that Anakin falls into throughout this process, is like, he's becoming a knight. He's having to deal with this new relationship. Oh my gosh, he has to talk to the younglings. Very intimidating for him. What wisdom does he have to impart to them? But then after that, it's like, okay, we're on a mission. We're going. And when Palpatine is talking about moving the Jedi and the Republic closer together, Anakin talks about his faith in the institutions, like being run by the right people. And he firmly believes that like these people are doing the right things and that's ultimately the right choices to make during this time. But if he had the ability to step back and step out of the situation, I bet he would think differently of it. There's this incredible quote from Mill on page 140 or just like her thoughts. And it says, Anakin had revealed that he'd grown up enslaved, and now he was, as a Jedi, commanding clones bred for war. The whole thing unnerved Mill. Right? Like, so that's a little bit like, okay, he grew up enslaved and now he is commanding people who were made for a specific purpose. It is essentially enslavement, is it not? They are all the same identity on the surface, and they're all made to go to war to die. And now he is the leader of them. He's the one who is saying charge.
Yeah, and when Mill brings that point up to him, he sort of thinks, oh yeah, I guess we sort of jumped into this war head first and fell in line with these soldiers like immediately. And no one has really pondered who they are and why they're here. We're just sort of accepted, yes, this is our army. We're going to fight alongside them. And we trust that they're going to try to do some good in the galaxy the best way they can. And we're not going to question that. Like, they are brothers to us, right? And I think that also speaks to the fact that in the Clone Wars, we see all these clones who have distinct personalities, like, you know, Cody, Echo, Rex, Jesse, like all these clones. And that's like amazing. But at the same time, I think that jumping into the war without asking those questions is what leads to that sort of trust that's their downfall, because they place so much trust in these soldiers that they don't know who actually ordered. No one's asking that question. And we've talked about that before, like, hey, who ordered this clone army? Nobody's asking that. That could be a big situation later on, right? And so it's a part of Palpatine's grand scheme. And even when Palpatine is talking to Anakin about Anakin's unease with Padawans taking on military missions, and like he's like, they're not ready, Palpatine's like, well, they have to feel comfortable around the clones. We must prepare for every possibility. And I'm like, oh god, he is laying the groundwork for Order 66. Like, he wants the Jedi to eventually have their back turns because they don't ever think to worry about who's watching their six, except the clones. Great, good, I'm safe, right?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like he's manipulating the Jedi into this false sense of reality because of their hubris, because of their dogma, because they don't question things as much as they should. You know, like somebody like Qui-Gon might have, or like Dooku did and told Obi-Wan, hey, the Sith Lord, he's running everything. And Obi-Wan's like, nope, I don't believe you, right? So that's the hubris. They let Palpatine rise to power, and it starts here. It starts with this war and just jumping headfirst into it.
Yeah, and Windu is a part of that as well, you know, throughout this story and throughout this narrative. But like, it's very interesting because ultimately no one is yelling loud enough that others really catch on in the order. And so as he's setting up Order 66, the Jedi being scattered, which also lays the groundwork for Order 66 to be effective. But it's interesting because the Jedi go along with it and see themselves as the natural leaders kind of the clones, if that makes sense. They, I don't want to say willingly, but also willingly take on that responsibility and recognize that as a responsibility that they have to follow into. Which, I don't know, I'm just interested. I'm just fascinated by this order. They're very complicated, but like, why are they making these choices? And it's like, well, Palpatine is very, very persuasive.
We're talking about Palpatine, and we can't fail to mention how this is a war where one man is playing both sides to his own advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's at the heart of this book with that time on Cato Nemoidia, right? We finally learn, all those years ago, 2005, like, what the heck are they talking about? What's that time on Cato Nemoidia, that business that Obi-Wan references, right? And we finally learn about it, and it's really it's sort of like the turning point at the very onset of the war to sort of say, okay, this war is either going to go very terribly, or maybe we have a chance to de-escalate before it gets even worse, right? And so that's Obi-Wan's whole mission in this book, is to go to Nemoidia, find out who set off these bombs, and see if there's a way to figure it out so that that they can clear the air and prevent more lives from being lost. Like, that's his whole thing, is like, if we can get the Trade Federation and the Nemoidians to agree with the Republic that the ultimate goal for both of us is nobody else dies, that's a net positive for everybody. Like, set aside our differences. This is the most important thing that allows all of us to succeed, right? And so he's got to get past previous injustices done against the Nemoidians by the Republic. He's got to get past all the prejudice that they faced and try to go there in good faith and prove to them he's there in good faith and that he has no bias and that he's really just trying to get to the truth of it all.
Which is perhaps an impossible task for him, simply because the only reason that he's going there alone is one that is set up ultimately, right, by Count Dooku. He's like, it's the Republic's fault, and the Republic is like, let us know that's not, so it's almost an impossible task because he's put in a position where he's like really got the short end of the stick to begin with, and he can't communicate with anybody, so he's really on his own to figure it all out.
Yeah, and it feels like when he does get more information and he tries to do more good, it almost makes the whole effort go in the complete opposite direction and like present itself as bad faith. Like, he finds the information that implicates the Republic, but he's like, hey, I want to check this out. Is it legitimate information? Is it fake information? I want to vet this before I bring it to the table. But by him concealing that information in order to double check it, it seems like he is trying to cover up the Republic's wrongdoings. And so, like, his efforts to be a good standing person trying to discover the truth makes it look like he's concealing the truth, which could or could not be the truth. We don't know yet until we really find at the end it is both sides, because Rug finds out that there is evidence implicating the separatists, right? And so there's this whole idea now that, okay, maybe the war is not what we thought. Maybe it's not just one group of extremists. It might just be both of these giant powers in the galaxy who are doing bad, and there's one person at the center of it, and we have to kind of figure out how to avoid that from happening in the future. It makes it very complicated.
Well, there's a key quote that kind of sets this all up for Obi-Wan, and he says, I think to Dex, without context, facts are useless. Right. So, I mean, throughout this story, he's really looking for the proper context for what he's found.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, too, that you mention facts, how important facts are with context. And there's a point where Obi-Wan is giving his speech pleading for de-escalation. And he thinks to himself he had put his faith in facts, but completely ignored the power of emotion and swaying the masses. No matter what he might have said, what evidence he might have presented, nothing would connect with mourning people like one of their own playing the power of displaced grief. And that is so interesting because there's this idea throughout the book of extremism that's presented and the power of our emotions. And I think we especially see that with Kitar and the way that Ventress sort of grooms him into these very violent behaviors to the point where he is like literally willing to bomb his own people in order to prove a point, right? Like, how does somebody like Kitar, who is definitely like loyal to Nemoidia and has this really, really sad story of his parents and how they were, they went to Coruscant and their art was vandalized, and then they left Coruscant and were attacked and killed by pirates, and how the Republic basically didn't care about them, even though they were killed in Republic-controlled hyperspace lanes, right? And so he has this tragic story, and like, how does a person like that get to the point where, fingers on the trigger, about to blow this place up? I think part of Obi-Wan's mission is to prevent that from happening to more people, because the galaxy's in a state of disarray where people are very disillusioned by the Republic. They want to start leaving the Republic. It's a time of civil war, right? And he's trying to say like, no, it's not about like, neutrality and like leaving the Republic and staying neutral to it and not getting involved. It's actually about like active de-escalation. It's about making sure these things don't happen, but it takes an effort. It doesn't take, just being a bystander and hoping it doesn't eventually arrive on your doorstep, because it will. I think that's something also that like Rug believes in. I think she thinks that the galaxy is much more connected than people realize, and that, things that happen way over here in the Outer Rim are eventually going to connect and affect things in the core. Like, it's all connected, right? And I think Obi-Wan does see that bigger picture and how like the rise in extremism is playing into that.
Yeah, I think Kitar is a really interesting figure in this story, especially when you have him paired up with Rug, because we see Rug, first of all, Rug, so cool, so badass, so awesome, so powerful, women, but like we see Rug, who has seen a lot in her life, who has done a lot, who is very hardened, but she's dedicated. She has her purpose. She's protecting the Nemoidians, but she protects her people. That's what she does. And sometimes she has to do difficult or terrible things in the name of the Nemoidians, but she understands that this is what she can control and this is what she can do. And she's kind of attempting to train Kitar in that same worldview, in that same space. But Kitar, as you mentioned, comes from such a story of tragedy. And this tragic story puts him in a vulnerable position to feel like a victim. And I think that's kind of the first key towards extremism. What happened to Kitar's parents was awful and was not right. And the response to the Republic's response to his parents' death and the like slighting broadly of the Nemoidians and their culture was wrong. It was ultimately wrong. And Kitar took that so personally, where there was a gap where he could be manipulated into that becoming more. And this idea of extremism and how Kitar gets radicalized is really analogous to our own world and how people on the internet get radicalized to like far-right extremist views, where they're willing to be violent. And
not off of facts, off of emotions. Right? And which is what Obi-Wan's saying. He puts so much faith in facts and not in the emotional power of displaced grief.
Yeah, that in like that displaced grief, it can become like a perceived or realized like victimhood too. Like, things are not going my way anymore. And therefore I am a victim. I am the one who is, being looked down upon by the powers that be. So it's really interesting. Like, once this book kind of all clicked for me once Kitar turned out to be the person that he became here. Because I went, oh, okay, this is the story that we're telling. This is what we're doing here. Rug maintains her commitment to her people, to Nemoidia. She makes this choice at the end of the book. She recognizes that Kitar has called her a traitor, but she like knows who she is and what she has to do. And ultimately, like, she stays with the Cato Nemoidians with the Nemoidians, and then ultimately escapes. Great ending for her. Very glad to see it. But Kitar and Rug split up, and Ventress kind of takes Kitar under her wing you really begin to see the precision of violence in Ventress's language and how easy it is for him to be manipulated into agreeing with her. And ultimately, he's responsible for almost killing everybody and for making those choices. And Ventress really pinpoints exactly what she needs to pinpoint in order to set him off about the Jedi and the Republic and how the Jedi operates. Because what's most interesting about Ventress and her twisting of it all is that there is like a sliver of something recognizable in there. There's a sliver of truth, or not even truth, but just like understanding there. Because I think we can say, oh yeah, well, the Jedi do take young Jedi as babies and children and ultimately raise them. And you can twist that into, well, they steal them right out of the womb. Right. And that becomes very violent and aggressive language. And of course, somebody would latch onto that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she says, think of what Newt Gunray said. They're frightening speed and power on the boo, and now they're going from keepers to soldiers commanding a military. Is that not concerning to you, Kitar? Like, does that frighten you? And he's like, yeah, it kind of does. And so the Separatists' endgame, Dooku's endgame, Ventress's endgame, and ultimately Palpatine's endgame is to weaponize those emotions, turn them into violent ends, and cause chaos across the galaxy to the point where it splinters the unity and allows the masses to give a democracy away to an empire and give it into the hands of Palpatine, to where he can say, I'm going to bring everybody back together. Law and order. That's the new thing. Clearly, we've seen during these Clone Wars, things are pretty bad. People are pretty violent and people are very upset about what's going on. So I'm going to change that. And so then he sort of weaponizes that emotion and that grief in Revenge of the Sith to then take control. And it's all a path, right? And it's so cleverly put together by Palpatine in a way that it's actually frightening and it's scary and
very frightening.
I think that's why something like the prequel era is so fascinating to me, because it has so many real world parallels. And it is such a political statement. To say Star Wars isn't political is really silly when you look at the prequels, right? Because it is it's a story about democracy being given away, and then like thunderous applause happening afterwards.
Right. So if you think about the idea of the Overton window, right? It shifts as the public opinion shifts of what is acceptable in the mind's eye. Like things that we wouldn't have considered acceptable 10 years ago are now considered acceptable because people in power have said them or demonstrated these things. And then the Overton window has shifted to be in the window of acceptable activities. So when we are in a violent state, when we are in a war, when violence is part of the everyday vocabulary and is not something that is simply just a shock and awe tragedy, right? It makes the idea of everyday violence, of moving towards extremism, even more viable for people who are vulnerable to extremist ideas, right? Like when you're talking about when you're talking about a war, when you're talking about violence and you become desensitized to that, it makes the violence seem like an easier choice to make. So even though we read like Kitar's choice to like bomb his fellow people as like egregious and horrible and just about the worst thing you could possibly do, he is seeing it as, well, the Republic or the Separatists or whoever have already murdered my people, and the only way that I can even attempt to get any sort of justice is do the same thing back and cause problems, even if it will get them nowhere near it. And so it's just very interesting to see how with the prequels and these stories, we can watch some of these same ideas happen in our world. And that you were just saying, like, the prequel has so many rich layers that you can just kind of dive into in this way.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk about like Obi-Wan and Roog for a second. And I think Roog is the person to flip Obi-Wan's entire faith in the institution. And like, we know Obi-Wan's so loyal to the Republic, right? His allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. And Roog is the one to sort of flip that for him and shatter his world and make him sort of be taken aback by the truth. And she even tells him, The galaxy is a brutal, cold place with no logic or compassion. I've seen it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it sort of opens up this new mode of thinking for him that like recognizes the really ugly underbelly of what's happening. And it sort of like puts into new context for him the war and like what it means now that they're becoming generals. Like he is sort of participating in that brutality of the galaxy, right? It makes him so unnerved. And I love the whole conversation that they have when they're getting drinks and Obi-Wan's saying he really wants to believe in truth or else they have nothing. And she's like, do you really think the truth of this, like no matter which way you spin it, is going to bring those people back that died on Cato Nemoidia? And he's like, well, no, it won't. But I believe in justice and I believe it finds a way. And that, you know, we choose to do right even in the face of so much wrong because there is no other way. And I almost thought of like Qui-Gon and Master and Apprentice when he says like, you know, I choose the light because it's not the darkness and because there is no other way except the light. That's why I choose it, right?
I choose the light because it is the light.
Right. And so that's sort of a very Qui-Gon mode of thinking. I choose justice in the face of evil because it is justice and there is no other way. And Roog is like, you know, in theory, you're right, but I've seen it firsthand. The galaxy tries to break you. And Obi-Wan says, but we have to have hope. And Roog says, unfortunately, I became numb to hope a long time ago. And it's just so fascinating after watching Kenobi and starting with a version of him who is sitting in a cave after the galaxy has literally broken him and made him lose everything. And he has lost all hope completely. But somehow hope will survive and he'll find that hope again. But it's just fascinating to me that we really start to see the gears turning for him in this book and to realize that the galaxy is not a fair place and it's not always a just place and that it will break you eventually in some ways, especially during this time.
Well, the thing is that neither of them in that conversation, at least the way you're describing it, are wrong necessarily. Mm-hmm. He believes in justice because he believes there can be justice. He believes in hope and this idea that we can do right by each other. And it's not that Roog doesn't believe in it necessarily. I think she does, but she's no longer able to see it for herself and those around her. And they both see the world in the same way with just different eyes. And I don't know if I'm saying nonsense right now, but like they're both struggling with the idea of what is right and how to approach it, I guess is what we're getting at.
Yeah. Obi-Wan and Roog really present a unique pairing in this book to have those discussions about the state of the galaxy. But another connection that I made was that he was wondering, you know, the important thing is how those emotions and these things are being weaponized, not the culprit behind it all. It doesn't matter who the Sith Lord is. And it makes me think of the High Republic when Marchion Ro is like, they should not be focused on the how. There will always be a flaw to exploit, a weakness. It's not the how, it's the who. And the who is Marchion Ro. And so again, like, even though Obi-Wan's trying his best, he's still looking at the wrong thing. And he's still going to look at the wrong thing. And the Jedi will look at the wrong thing. And they're not going to be asking who, they're asking the how. How is this happening? How is the Clone Wars happening? Not who is behind it all, who's architecting it from both sides. And I think we start to get there. I think Roog tries to help him get there by saying, don't look at it as a binary. It's all these sides that are playing into it. And he doesn't quite get there. You know, we were on the verge of greatness, Obi-Wan, this close. You almost got there. But I think it's an admirable mission that he takes on to try to de-escalate the war.
Yeah.
And he makes this really impassioned speech to the Nemoidians, and he plays to their emotions. He recognizes the hurt that the Republic has caused, and he can't justify it. And so I think that's important for Obi-Wan's character to acknowledge those things that have happened. And I think he tries to see the Nemoidians as people. But I understand why the Nemoidians don't feel that they've gotten the respect they've deserved over time by the Republic. A lot of prejudice by the Republic, for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of it that's ultimately subconscious, right? When Obi-Wan is asked, like in describing one word, who the Nemoidians are, and I think he says, what's the word? Independent?
Yeah.
the Nemoidians come back at him and say, well, here's the situation that you've put us in, and here's the box that you've put us in. When you say that, you're failing to recognize our own humanity, which is just a really interesting sort of discussion on the ways that we have internalized or subconscious biases against communities that are not our own. And I think it's a powerful exploration of these ideas because it is very front and center and in a public setting within the context of this story at the grand theater of judgment.
Mm-hmm. It's all fascinating. Can you tell we love this time period, folks? Can you tell we love politics in Star Wars and the prequel era? Because we've been talking about it for quite some time here.
Yeah, they can't. So we should do another hour of just this.
I could talk about this all day, and I would. But I think we should start talking about Anakin Skywalker and his journey.
Yeah. I really think that Anakin is a fascinating character because we get 3 distinctly different versions of him in the prequel movies. We obviously get young Jake Lloyd like portraying him as a boy on Tatooine. We get Hayden Christensen playing Anakin Skywalker, Jedi apprentice to Obi-Wan. And then we get Anakin Skywalker, Jedi Knight, turning evil, right? And we miss a lot of the connective tissue that gets him between, the first days of his time as a Jedi to when he is 10 years older to when he is ultimately so paranoid and vulnerable and in pain that he makes terrible choices for himself and others around him. And this book really fills in a lot of that. And ultimately, I think Anakin is a man who is trying to understand who he is right now. He has witnessed a lot of change with his recent marriage to Padme. He's also lost his hand, so he's dealing with this new mechanical hand where sand gets in it everywhere all the time, and it's not quite reacting to his movements in the way that he would expect his hand to. He's now a leader with the Jedi Order as he becomes a mentor to the younglings, and he is trying to figure out, as Rey would say, I need someone to show me my place in all this. Like he's having that moment. Like there are these moments when he's feeling confident and is really taken with his new roles. And there are other moments where he faces this deep insecurity, like deep in his heart about who he is and where he's supposed to be and what he should be doing and why he's here right now with Mill or not with Obi-Wan, right? So he's trying to figure that out for himself. And it makes this story so rich for Anakin.
Mm-hmm. I think it's cool too because we've never seen Anakin at this specific point in his life, which I think is one of my favorite aspects of this book. We're seeing a man who was, like you said, recently married and is going through so much and is now outgrowing his teenage years and is now a soldier, right? He's sort of rushed into adulthood even further because of what's going to be asked of him, what's expected of him. And he will grow quite a bit. And he grows a lot in this book to the point where Obi-Wan recognizes some of the things that he hadn't seen before or had neglected to see before. And Anakin's turning into this amazing man in a way. Like, again, Mike Chen said he wants people to walk away from this book feeling empathetic towards Anakin. And I do think we see some of his best qualities on display, especially with Mill, and especially in the way that he thinks of himself as the Sun Dragon, which we'll get to. And I think there are pros and cons to him thinking of himself as the Sun Dragon, but ultimately it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of wanting to be somebody that cares for others. And it comes from a place of when he would sit in bed and his mom, Shmi, would be at the edge of his bed reading him a bedtime story about the Sun Dragon. Like it comes from a good place. And Anakin Skywalker wants to be a good person. It's just that he wants to be a good person so much and do so much good in the galaxy and protect the people that mean the most to him, that it's ultimately going to be his downfall because he doesn't understand how to reconcile all those feelings while also his insecurities at the same time.
He cares a lot.
He does.
Like
too
a
much,
lot,
almost.
a lot.
Yeah.
And I feel like as somebody who is a very emotionally driven sort of person, I can really empathize with that and how it can give him a lot of stress in his life as to, you know, like when he's separated from his mother, why that stresses him out. And then ultimately, again, he makes a bad choice, but like you can understand some of the emotions that bring him to the choice that he makes when he has to go, or when he decides he's going to go see his mother, like in Attack of the Clones. You can understand the pain that he feels and the desire that he feels to fix that situation. And yeah, it's ultimately, as you said, going to be his downfall, which maybe we should talk about Anakin as a husband just a little bit, and the lovely couple of scenes we get with Padme in this book, because we actually get to see a little bit of date night, a little bit of them being like a normal,
a little bit of
couple.
kissy kiss, a little bit of kissy kiss here and there, get in the back seat of the speeder, bring some blankets, and
yeah. Yeah, no, Anakin and Padme have this like really hilarious, lovely time at a speeder racetrack on the lower levels of Coruscant that you can only access by paying a secretive group only known as the Family some credits.
It's so sketchy.
It's very sketchy, but very fascinating. And this scene is really lovely because you get to understand how they function as people, and some of the guards that Anakin lets down when he's with Padme, but also which ones he still keeps up. Because he's always got walls with everybody. He's just like building and tearing down different walls when he's around different people.
Mm-hmm. And the date night is so important too, because, you know, we've read Queen's Hopes, which also takes place after Anakin and Padme's wedding. So we know that after that happens, there's a lot of separation between these two. So they don't necessarily get the honeymoon that they want or the time that they want to spend together fully, right? They're kind of going in all different sorts of places. And so for them to actually spend an evening together and to do these sorts of things means a lot to Anakin. And it almost creates this frustration of like, why can't it always be like this? Like, why can't we just always be a normal couple? You know, it's this moment of peace and quiet as husband and wife that matters the most to me. And he just has this yearning to be in a galaxy that is allowing them to be free to exist without any sort of restrictions and to be free from any scrutiny or judgment or limitations. He even wonders like what would have happened if Qui-Gon hadn't found me. Like, would I be on the pod racing circuit? Would I have like a new life with a dangerous recreation? Would my mom still be alive? And he locks those feelings away, but he does think of them because he does ponder that life. And I do ultimately wonder, like, would he have eventually left the Jedi Order? Who knows? But I think his love for Padme trumps all else.
Yeah, and it's clear that like Padme is really loving and kind to him as well, and like really respects him and appreciates him and like indulges his interests because you know, they go around this racetrack at ridiculously high speeds, and you know, she laughs and she goes, "Anakin, that was exhilarating and I never want to do it again," you know? So she's like, "I will do it once, we will have a good time, and that will be it, buddy-o." But then also like Anakin, we talk about Anakin being more machine than man throughout his life as Vader. We see Anakin, you know, like concerned about his prosthetic hand and how he's dealing with it. And he feels like it makes Padme uncomfortable. And she says, "It doesn't bother me. It never will." And he goes, "Yeah, I know. It's just not something I'm totally used to yet." And she goes, "It's part of you." So she really accepts him for who he is and all of his faults and all of the things that make him unique. And also just as things change. And I think that is really wonderful to see from Padme, because we see how strong she is and how much of a leader she is, and how much she loves him throughout the story and really believes in him. But we just don't get to see those super quiet moments a lot with them. We kind of see them as things are tumbling, but we're also seeing them from Anakin's point of view.
Mm-hmm. And I also love the way that Mike describes the relationship of these two as a delicate balance of Anakin's selflessness to the Jedi Order and like giving himself over to that and like trying to strive for galactic peace, while at the same time Padme is selfless in the sense that she's a senator and she wants to try to find ways to fix things, and she will do whatever it can to do that. And I think that's why they are sort of in this constant state of infatuation with each other, because they have the same goals. They just don't approach it from the same method necessarily. And it's like a passion and a purpose locked together. And that's how he describes it, the sort of delicate balance of those two things. And I like that we see that through Anakin's eyes, especially when he sees the ways in which Padme looks at the lower levels of Coruscant, and her concern is, like, do the people down here know what's happening? Like, do the people down here ever escape living down here? Like, do they get to see the above levels of Coruscant? Or are they just always down here forever? Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. Like, we don't often think about the underbelly of Coruscant. Like, we've seen Trace and Rafa in the Clone Wars. Like, we see what their way of life is like. But when you think about it, there are people on Coruscant who probably live on level, 1313 their whole life.
Oh, 1313, just a random level, just throwing
random,
it out there. Never heard those numbers in a
Still
sequence
sad
before.
about it. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
But there's people who live on those levels, and they never see what's at the top or the sun, right? It's very fascinating to see how much Anakin has respect and admiration for Padme, and the way that she recognizes that disparity and in the way of life for people, and the inequality that is present on this planet, and that she will try what she can to mitigate that inequality in wartime. And like, he recognizes that she'll probably attempt to, or by talking to the people there and like getting to know them and getting to know like their situation. And it's why she ultimately assigns Sabe to go to Tatooine and start freeing slaves there, because Padme is somebody who recognizes injustice and wants to fix it.
Anakin wants that too for those around him and those that he loves, which there's this great line, I think, I don't know where it's from, maybe from this book, or it's like when you have Anakin as a friend, like he's loyal to the end, or something of that sort, that talks about how loyal Anakin is, and how committed he is to the people that he loves. And if you talk about commitment, you talk about relationships, you can't fail to mention Palpatine, because he and Palpatine have this very interesting relationship that throughout this book, and we've talked a little bit about Palpatine's machinations in this story and how we kind of get from point A to point B with the Jedi kind of folding into the Republic and the army. But there's also a couple moments in this story where I just was like, what? That weren't those big moments. And one of them is this incredibly scary line on page 95. He said, or Anakin says in his mind, did the others even realize that the Chancellor had enjoyed casual conversations with him ever since he arrived on Coruscant? That's it. That's a line. And I just literally was like, what? So like, nobody even knows that he has this relationship with Palpatine, but Palpatine has kind of been playing him as a pawn in this game, as like the king in this game of chess, since he was 9. And of course, when Anakin receives this sort of attention and this sort of dedication to, and this like real sense of caring about his progress, right? Because like Palpatine does show that, he's following along. He's seemingly genuinely interested in the strides that Anakin is making in his time as a Jedi. He's growing up. He seems concerned about him. And so, of course, Anakin is just like really invested in this relationship. But the reason that Palpatine is able to do this to him and manipulate him in this way is that nobody else knows about it. Nobody else even is really aware, or maybe perhaps a couple are. I would imagine that Obi-Wan has some sense of what's going on with regards to like them having some sort of friendship or relationship. But like, no wonder nobody steps in prior to like, hey, can you spy hey, can you spy for us?
Right. Like they will know eventually. Like that's why they try to use Anakin. And I think it's what causes an issue because for Anakin, it feels like, hey, none of you cared about forming a friendship with me, and now you want to use like the one great friendship I have to your own gain. So I feel betrayed by that.
Exactly.
Yeah. The conversation between Anakin and Palpatine is quite jarring in this because
red flags everywhere.
Everywhere. There's so many red flags because Palpatine's like, the Tusken Raiders killed your mom. Of course you want revenge. How could you not when facing such an injustice? Like, do it, man. And
revenge good.
He says,
actually.
quote, "It seems like simple mathematics to me," end quote. That is so grotesque to think of killing Tusken Raiders in that way. Like, that is just like horrible. And Palpatine like offers like, did the Jedi actually care about anybody? Like, let's be honest, Mace Windu, he's the greatest warrior, but do you think he actually cares about people?
And Anakin says, not in the way that you or I do.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. It just made me yell.
Yeah.
Yell.
Palpatine saying, Windu can go on for hours and hours about shatterpoints, but perhaps the lack of empathy is his own shatterpoint. Oh my God. That's such a good line, but whoo-wee. That is really bad. And Palpatine recognizes how big of a heart Anakin has. And when you think of this conversation in tandem with the conversation that they're going to have in the Roth's novelization, these are a direct link. They're a mirror of each other in some ways, because when we get to Roth's and Anakin's talking to Yoda, Stover wrote this line when Yoda says, let go of everything you fear to lose. Anakin thinks, does Yoda actually care about anybody? And so here we have Palpatine sort of planting the seed of that idea and saying, does Mace Windu actually care about anybody? Does he? And so again, you just see the ways in which Palpatine is grooming Anakin Skywalker to strengthen his belief in Palpatine as a political leader, strengthen his belief in the institution, and the people running the institution. More importantly, like, believe in the people, Anakin, not the democracy. Believe in the people. So if I'm saying that we need an empire, that's more important than the need for a democracy, because you trust me and I'm in charge, right?
Yeah.
And even Anakin thinks, like, the more bad actors who are in the shadows that we get out, the better. And he thinks to himself, quote, if corruption did exist somewhere within the Republic government, it had to be rooted out and eliminated. It's this type of thinking.
Just want to shake them.
Yeah. I'm like, Anakin. No. It's this type of thinking that eventually allows Palpatine to go, hey, the Jedi are traitors. Get rid of all of them. And in Anakin's mind,
participate in that.
Yeah, and
he's like, well, yeah.
Anakin's mind, he thinks he's rooting out that corruption. He thinks he's rooting out the bad actors, the Jedi. He's bringing peace, freedom, and justice and security to his new empire, right? So it's all connected. It's these quiet, small conversations that nobody else knows about behind the scenes, and it's allowing Palpatine to get his foot in the door and build his soon-to-be Darth Vader soldier into what he needs it to be. Anakin.
Yeah.
Oof.
So you mentioned, like, the Palpatine, do you think Master Windu even cares? And there's this interesting line on page 105 where it's part of the same, I think, conversation. And he's thinking about the night that his mother died and that he killed the Tusken Raiders. But it says, before that night, Anakin thought he knew pain. His first few days in the Jedi Order, the undying ache of missing his mother, compounded with the way that the Jedi seemed to talk and act with this intentional, calm distance. Those dark times were a speck of dust compared with the endless desert of that night, that moment when his mother's body went limp, unable to finish her final word. That is a very powerful kind of paragraph there. However, I really want to highlight this: seemed to talk and act with an intentional, calm distance. And then you go, oh, I wonder, I get it now, why the Jedi get these babies instead of getting them as 9-year-old children who have an ingrained set of thoughts, beliefs, and worldview. Because then it is a lot less easy to fold them into this sort of distance. I am going to bring up the idea of toxic masculinity right now, because this idea that
like spicy.
This idea that like men are supposed to be tough and strong and not emotional, and that explicitly creates distance between people, right? When you're not able to have human to human emotions, you bottle, which is a serious problem for all people in our society, but often men, because they're not taught to be able to use their emotions, right? In the same way that women are nurtured to do that. So bringing it back to the Jedi, like the Jedi are doing the same thing. They are saying, you know, we're going to be stoic, we're going to be calm, we're going to be put together, we're going to be strong. We are going to not have any attachments. We're going to let go of anything we fear to lose. We're not going to love each other, and it's going to be fine.
There is no emotion, there is peace.
Right. And we're also going to have incredibly tight bonds, master and apprentice, and you're going to love the kids that you're with, but then you're going to become a stoic adult who doesn't have any problems ever. And it becomes a problem in the fandom when like fans think that these Jedi can't like have fallible moments, when they can't struggle. And then we look at then we look like a character like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi who really struggles, and they're like, that's not Luke. It's like, but yeah, but like he's a person at the end of the day. He's more than a Jedi, he's a person. Wow, I'm on a whole soapbox right now.
No, I love it. Please don't stop, because also take those Jedi edicts, set it in wartime, and go, hey, by the way, I know you're not supposed to have attachments. I recognize that you've grown an attachment to your master and or your Padawan or apprentice, but we're in wartime. They could die, and you're not supposed to be sad about it, by the way, right?
Yeah, and you're just not supposed to grieve anybody. There's a war, but you're not allowed to be sad about it.
And then rewind that to the High Republic, and like, what are so many of those Jedi dealing with? Like people like Vernestra Rowe. I'm scared for my friends. I don't want to lose my friends. Like, what happens if I lose my friends? Like, same thing that Lula Talisola is asking herself. Same thing that Reath Silas is battling with. Same thing Ram Jamaram. Like, the same fundamental question of like, you're telling me that I'm not supposed to feel for the people around me, but all I see is violence that is taking the lives of people around me. And then you have that, what did Anakin refer to it as? The quiet displacement, right?
In what, this intentional calm distance?
Yeah. So,
also in a quiet displacement. Yeah.
These people are seeing that from the Jedi Order, and you're like, how is this possible? How is nobody reacting to what's going on? Something is wrong here. And I think that's what, in the High Republic era, leads to more people leaving the Jedi Order, and we ultimately get the Lost 20. And it's what really felt off for Qui-Gon, somebody who followed his moral compass more so than like the Jedi Code. And it's something that Anakin is now feeling as well.
I mean, Anakin has been told his whole life that he's the chosen one from like the age of 9, but like he's like, okay, well, I was just a kid on Tatooine who was a slave, and I just was living my life trying to build C-3PO, and now you're telling me I'm literally the single most important person in the galaxy who's gonna save everybody, and also you don't want me to be sad about the loss of my mother, and like you don't want me to be sad about the loss of my life before this, and like no wonder it's he's never felt like he's fit in reality. So it's very easy to sow the seeds of distrust with the Jedi because he doesn't trust them to begin with. This intentional calm distance are walls that he builds when he's around other Jedi. You can see it in the films when he's with Padme on Naboo, like versus when he's talking to other Jedi around him. He builds these walls so he becomes this intentional, calm, distant person too. But earlier in this book, we get the truth of Anakin, and you can see it in his body language when he is at his most natural. And it says on page 23, Anakin, so bold in his determination, usually walked with his weight carrying him forward, nearly leaning ahead as if he were chasing the future, which, chef's kiss, so good. But like, the truth of it is that he's not this intentionally calm person. He's somebody who cares with his entire being.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the tragedy, is that he lives in a society, he lives in a place where that was never nurtured for good.
You know who Anakin shares a lot of similarities with?
Who?
Mil Alabeth.
Oh, great transition. That was so smooth. Nobody's going to even know you were transitioning.
I love that this book didn't just give us like Ahsoka Tano and like how Anakin becomes Ahsoka Tano's master, because I think that could have been a story to be told.
Sure.
Maybe we'll get it in Tales of the Jedi. Who knows?
Do we like, we just drop right into Clone Wars and it's like, hi, I'm Anakin Skywalker and this is my Padawan Ahsoka Tano. Is that the vibe?
It almost literally that's like literally the scene. Yeah. So
I mean, I've seen many of the early episodes. I just don't remember.
Yeah, it happens right in the movies. You're like, oh, what? He has a Padawan? What's happening? And so Mike referred to Mil Alabeth as this like pseudo Ahsoka. In a way, it's giving Anakin the skills necessary to eventually take on a Padawan. And I think it's so cool that Mil mirrors a lot of Anakin's traits, and a lot of her anxieties are his anxieties that he shares. And they're both people who have a lot of empathy and have a lot of caring for other people above all else. And that's why at the end of the book, when Mil is pretty confident in her decision that she doesn't want to be a Jedi Knight, and that, you know, her strength is her empathy, and that's what sets her apart, according to Anakin. Like, because in his mind, he feels like his empathy sets him apart from everybody else. And so he gives that guidance to Mil and that assurance, and tells the rest of the Jedi, Yoda and Mace and Obi-Wan, like, trust Mil here. Like, listen to what she's saying. What she's saying is important. And we have to listen to her. And Obi-Wan recognizing that, like, wow, Anakin's sticking up for Mil here, even though it's not something he necessarily like agrees with, like the methods of like leaving the Jedi Order or like not being a Jedi Knight or whatever. But like, he's really listening to her.
But maybe he does.
Yeah, from Obi-Wan's point of view, he thinks, right, that's what he thinks. But I think from Anakin's point of view, Anakin is still feeling many of the same things, but Obi-Wan doesn't realize it.
Well, I think that Anakin, you know, we talk about this quote about like, sometimes you just need permission from somebody you trust. And Anakin is giving her that permission right there. But I also think that Anakin wishes that he had been given that permission to feel in the same way that Mil is allowed to feel. And I think Mil is such a great character in this book, and why their relationship is so strong is because she just tears down all his walls, because he can't hide from her, because she is an empath. And I think that was perhaps the smartest thing that Mike did in this entire book, is like, hey, here's a character that can't hide from Anakin. Have fun, Anakin. You know, like, and you see such moments of tenderness with Mil that are really touching and thoughtful, and a new, like, if you haven't watched Clone Wars, like, are explicitly a new side of Anakin to be seen, and for the character is a new side of him to be seen prior to his taking on Ahsoka in the Clone Wars. So this is like the newness of that feeling with regards to Anakin in this part of the timeline, which is really interesting, and really goes back to him as a kid. Isn't he the one that says, is like, the worst thing in the world is that people aren't kind to each other?
That nobody helps each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's who Anakin is at his core. And we're getting to see him helping somebody else in a real tangible way here in this story with Mil, and allowing her to find her own path. So we love Mil Alabeth. Hashtag save Mil Alabeth from Order 66. Hashtag save Mil Alabeth. Hashtag Mil Alabeth, queen of my heart.
Yeah, and for Anakin to dig somebody out of that same hole that he was in, right? Like she doesn't feel the Force. It's overwhelming for her. So it's kind of like she's disconnecting from it. And Anakin recognizes that vacant spot within the Force, because like he was there. Like he's able to detect that so easily. And he tells her, like, listen, I've been there. The darkest, loneliest days I experienced was like right after I became a Padawan, and like I had no compassion from my peers. I shut myself off, and all it did was push me further into a corner. And I realized I actually needed the Force to get me through, because when I questioned the Force, even disconnected from it, that is what brought me back. That is what brought me through. It's just so beautiful how she gets guidance in a way that Anakin maybe didn't get that same sort of guidance from somebody else. Like, I don't think it's really specified that Obi-Wan helped Anakin push through. Anakin found a lot of that resolution internally. And so here he is giving a helping hand to Mil, right? Like, maybe for Anakin, that helping hand would have been Qui-Gon. It could have been Obi-Wan. I don't think it was quite Obi-Wan, and it's not Obi-Wan's fault. But I think Mil needed somebody to step in for her and to help her out of that hole. And it's just such a beautiful relationship. I honestly hope that we see more of Mil at some point.
Please,
I
God,
totally
give
agree.
us more Mill. Don't let her die.
And I love how she uses her empathetic abilities to become somebody who is helpful. And, you know, this was in my odds and ends, but I'll mention it now. The fact that she is traveling to Valo at the end of the book.
Valo!
Which, like, High Republic connection, right? She's going with medical supplies and she's going to provide spiritual assistance to war-wounded Jedi, right? So she's following her path and she's discovering that there is a place for her within this order. And she doesn't just have to serve as a soldier partaking in violence. And she can serve a different type of purpose, right? And that's the result of her not giving up on the Force, but maybe thinking of it in a different way. And Anakin helps her to discover that. But ultimately, like, she makes the choice.
Also, we just see so little of that, Jedi taking other paths. Like, forgive me if I'm wrong on this one, but I feel like within the context of the 3 films, the only, like, Jedi we see, like, really taking another path outside of being, like, a warrior, peacekeeper, army person is, like, Jocasta Nu, Jedi librarian, right?
Yeah.
Like, and she's kind of, like, the only real other sort of career choice within the Jedi that we get. And we love, I mean, you and I both love the idea of the way seeker in the High Republic. And we love that these Jedi can do different things. Like, that's why we love Comac Vetus, is because he's like a historian and a folklorist. Like, he's doing all these interesting things. And then we have Orla, who kind of goes off and does her other thing. We don't get a lot of this in the prequels. So it was really heartwarming to know that these things still exist and that there are other options for someone like Mill, and that she gets to pursue them and not just leave the order altogether and forsake the Force.
I feel like she's straight out of the High Republic. Like, they plucked Mill from the High Republic and they're like, here you go. Here's a character that we were going to use in this era.
Yeah,
use her here instead.
We put her in the TARDIS and we brought her to an even worse time. Hooray.
But really, I think that's so cool. Like you're saying, we don't get to see that perspective in those films. And so to have that perspective brought into canon here is pretty cool. Is really awesome.
Yeah.
And I do want to make one last note of Anakin serving a mentor role in this book. I think it is so funny how he is babysitting a bunch of younglings on this transport and he has to like improvise a speech to sort of keep their attention and teach them something. It's like his next greatest assignment. But I do think like what he comes up with is really powerful, and he talks about how it's not what he learned, but who he learned it from. And I just want to make a note of all the people that he did mention because I think it's just so important. So first person he brings up is Kitster, which like that was so cool to see Kitster acknowledgement in this book. You know, totally wizard, right?
Totally wizard.
He says like Kitster is somebody who helps him find joy during a difficult time in his upbringing, and he could always find something worthwhile in the sand dunes alongside Kitster. Then there was Shmi, who taught him compassion, how to fix things. She encouraged him to be curious and to find a way. That's a very common theme with Anakin, you know, find a way no matter what. Even when the Republic laws weren't there for her. And she said that he said it was heart. She was all heart, and she wanted me to feel that way as well, to believe in my heart. And we're going to keep that in mind when we talk about the Sun Dragon. There was Obi-Wan, who taught him duty and honesty and hard work. Jar Jar, who was about loyalty and to never judge people because you can learn from every encounter. And then there was Qui-Gon with the line from the Phantom Menace, feel, don't think, trust your instincts. And so I think it's really beautiful how, again, it's the people around Anakin who have taught him who he needs to be, as opposed to like, the Force taught me who I need to be. I have followed the Force, and that is where I've gotten all my life lessons from, is the Force. I've trusted in the Force only. And it's like cool to trust in the Force, but ultimately like we are human beings with a very complex emotional spectrum, and our feelings and beliefs are painted by the people that we meet in our life, right? It's nature versus nurture. So for, like you're saying, the Jedi who were inducted as babies and didn't have that, you know, that upbringing, that childhood with Kitster and with Shmi, right? Yeah. Anakin's coming at it from a different point of view to say, I've had all these experiences and met all these people outside the order who've actually taught me how to be a human being, and none of you have gotten that, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I actually find it really interesting that he brings up all these people and these experiences. He's like, these are all the things that they taught me, and that was lovely. And like, find these things in your own life. And it's like, well, yeah, but they never had a mom.
Right.
Like, why are you bringing this up?
They
like,
never had a
them,
kidster.
Well, yeah, they never had like a childhood friend who wasn't also a Jedi, you know? Like, so it's really interesting to me that he brings all of these people up that other people just like have no experience of. I don't have an answer for that, but I just found it fascinating. I think you've done an interesting job of like explaining why he would bring that up and why it was important to him to have this specific conversation with these younglings. But yeah, I just found that to be like really, I'm talking really fast because I found it to be really fascinating.
Yeah, I highlighted the whole thing because I was like, this is so good. I'm like, as soon as I saw Kitster, I was like, oh, bookmarking the next 3 pages. Let's go. Like, I was so excited.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was a good time. So I appreciated that. All right. So our last part talking about Anakin here is probably the most important and has the most connective tissue to the Roth's novelization. And that is the story of the Sun Dragon. It's a myth about heart. And we just mentioned believing in your heart. So for those who haven't read the Revenge of the Sith novelization, the Sun Dragon myth was first introduced by Matthew Stover there, and it is a way in which Anakin Skywalker sees himself. It's a myth that was told across Tatooine. Growing up, Anakin heard a lot about it from his mom, and the myth basically goes, and I'll put it as it's described in Brotherhood, quote, "The Sun Dragon is a beast that lives inside a star, guarding everything it treasures. Nothing could hurt it, not fire, not flame. It survived through the most impossible circumstances, even life in the core of a star. Because the Sun Dragon had the biggest heart in the galaxy, a burning furnace powerful enough to protect everything and everyone it loved." Shmi used this story as a celebration for good days, a lesson for bad days, but it ultimately always came down to this, a lesson that she imparted to Anakin. Your heart can take you where you want to go, where you need to go, because it is strong enough. The strongest heart, stronger than the heart of a star. You are the Sun Dragon. You have the strongest heart. Always believe in it. Sarah's getting ready to say something very important. I think she's going to scream because she loves this.
I'm standing really far back because I have something to say. And that is that Anakin just cares a lot. He just cares a lot, and he has a big heart, and it's emotional. He's just a big teddy bear. And then he makes some bad choices because he's manipulated by other people, and it's sad. I'm sitting back down now.
I want to talk about this one other passage. We're just going to read a lot of we're going to read a lot of these words. Listen, Mike,
read a lot of these words, make me upset.
This is where Mike Chen just like packs all the emotional punches, and I hate to paraphrase his beautiful prose. So, quote, "He, Anakin, was the Sun Dragon with a heart more powerful than a star. He could do anything if he just cared enough. No, he would do anything. He would do everything. His existence in the Force was not a tug of war between duty and love, between friendship and partnership. It was all those things at once. He would not try to stifle himself into just one path. His heart would burn bright and commit to all of it. He felt it now, the voice in his head whispering a simple truth. This was Anakin Skywalker, the one who would simply find a way."
It's so painful. It's so painful because you can have the biggest heart and you can care about everybody. But like, if you care about everybody and everything, you live in the sad gap because you ultimately can't fix all the problems. Guys, go watch the Vlogbrothers Hank Green's video on the sad gap. It's worth your time. It's 4 minutes. But like, he lives in the sad gap because he can't fix everything. And that's his downfall ultimately in his own emotions, because like, he just struggles so much because he's put so much pressure on yourself. Gosh, I know what that feels like. Just like have the weight of the world on your shoulders because you've decided that everything is your problem and you have to fix it, and you have to make sure that everybody around you is feeling 100% of the time. It is tragedy. And it's like, yes, Anakin is fully responsible for the choices that he makes. But at the same time, like, I still think it is valuable to empathize with him and to understand exactly where he's coming from. I'm going to stop ranting about nothing.
It's so true though, because he is the Sun Dragon. He wants to protect the treasure, and for him the treasure is Padme, Obi-Wan, eventually Ahsoka, these people that mean the world to him. But yeah, like you're saying, it will ultimately be his downfall. And that's something that Obi-Wan is a little bit worried about. He's worried that, like, when the time comes, will Anakin make the right choice? Like without giving into his attachments and without letting those things take over, can he make the right decision? And I love the Sun Dragon myth, because you have the Sun Dragon in this book, and which is introduced in Rots, but in Rots as well, there was the Dead Star Dragon, and that's where Anakin recontextualizes the Sun Dragon myth that he heard growing up, because Obi-Wan, this is something that Mike Chen took from the Rots novel into this. It's this trip that Obi-Wan took to a star system, a dead star system that lingered at near absolute zero temperature. 12-year-old Anakin stows away on board, and Obi-Wan shows him this in the Rots novel and says, listen, even stars die. For Anakin, he felt like that was a indication that, oh crap, I can't save everything. Everything dies eventually. There is a finality to life. It's like growing up and you learn about death. This was that moment for Anakin Skywalker. And in the context of Brotherhood, it's a reminder of the Jedi Code regarding attachment and letting go, and that over time, even stars burn out. Like, I love how Mike uses that even stars burn out verbatim from the Rots novel, right? It's so beautiful. It's like poetry.
Yeah, it's like poetry. It rhymes? Question mark.
And so at Anakin Skywalker's core, he thinks of himself as the Sun Dragon, and he never wants to become the Dead Star Dragon. In the Rots novel, he thinks of that Dead Star Dragon coming to him in his sleep, reminding him, whispering in his ear of everything he has lost and everything he will lose. And Anakin Skywalker wants to do whatever he can to not become the Dead Star Dragon. He wants to remain the Sun Dragon, protect his treasure no matter what, and find a way no matter the circumstance. And he even thinks at one point about Padme. The only thing that truly mattered to Anakin's Sun Dragon heart was Padme. He would do anything to protect her, even if it meant shifting the entire axis of the galaxy. Wow.
Yeah. This is why the end of the book with Mill like taking his hand and telling him very quietly, you don't always have to be the Sun Dragon, is like stabbed to the heart, because she sees right through it. She sees the pressure that he puts on himself. She sees, she sees the care that he has in his heart. And she says, I see you care, and it matters, but you do not have to be responsible for everything. And he just has no idea what to do with that.
Mm-hmm. That moment with Mill and Anakin at the end is so crucial. It leaves Anakin almost dumbstruck, right? Because he's like, wow, she kind of just emotionally owned me there for a second. Like, I'm a little shook, right?
Yeah.
Like, wow, she really got to my core, understood who I was, and taught me something maybe after I've been teaching her the entire book. Like, now I'm really learning an ultimate lesson. When she thinks of Anakin Skywalker's very essence, she thinks of it as, quote, a smoldering furnace of a heart, a passion so furious that the intensity of his feelings might be the very thing to incinerate into his worst nightmare. A cold, withered dragon's final grasp of control. Notable cold, stars become cold when they die. So there's a little, absolute zero temperature. A little connection there, That's on purpose. A cold, withered dragon's final grasp of control, its brilliant home burned away into lifeless lump of materials. The life of a Jedi meant a life of sacrifice, but not to the point of self-destruction. He could choose differently if someone just gave him permission.
Permission!
And that is Mill, the line that you mentioned, giving Anakin permission to not have to be the Sun Dragon.
Although, does he listen?
Absolutely not. Although he does get permission in a different way. I thought the word permission was very interesting, given in the Rots novel when Palpatine tells him to do it, kill Dooku.
Oh boy, take it back.
Yeah.
Take it back. I don't want to hear that. Stop it.
Anakin thinks that's what he's been waiting for his whole life. permission.
Oh my God, no.
And
no. Okay.
one final Rats connection here because it's really hitting me in the feels. And
then we have to go to Obi-Wan because this hurts.
This hurts a lot. Mill thinking about how it's not supposed to be a life of self-destruction, and that is ultimately what Anakin does. He becomes the Death Star Dragon. He loses everything, and he's left in this like cold life that he has to live in the Vader suit. And from the Rats novel, the final lines in one of the final chapters, and within your furnace heart, you burn in your own flame. This is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker forever.
Forever.
Right? So you burn in your
own...
You burn in your own flame. That's the self-destruction. Mill is trying to warn him, don't approach that point. He does anyways. And that's the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker. It's so brutal. It's so brutal. It makes me want to cry. I actually cried when I first read those words in the Rats novel. I sobbed.
We gotta stop. We gotta stop talking about Anakin. I am the captain of this podcast now.
Okay.
And I have decided that we're going to talk about Obi-Wan because this is too much pain. And so I shall instead to move to one of the most other tragic characters of the entire the entire saga, because he's lost everybody he's ever loved throughout his life. And when he's given a task to watch over this one person, his uncle decides he's going to be an asshat to him and says, I don't want you around. But he's like, I have this responsibility anyway.
So what you're saying is we're going from one emotionally damaged Jedi to another. Perfect. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So this is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi is dealing with his role as a master, but now somebody who is an empty nester a little bit. He is dealing, or one of his new roles as an emissary for the Republic, being the voice of the Republic and the Jedi all rolled into one. He's also a longing lover, somebody who is alone and independent, but misses a love he once had, and also the relationship that he also once had with Anakin. I was talking about Satine before. So he is having to navigate the ways in which Anakin has become a man in some ways and deal with them as equals, as an adults, as opposed to him being a subordinate of sorts as a Padawan. But the core thing that Obi-Wan Kenobi really feels, the core to his being, very relatable, is imposter syndrome.
Relatable king. We love it.
I mean, okay, here's this quote from page 18. He thought back to his early days, his ascension into Jedi knighthood, counterbalanced by the loss of Qui-Gon Jinn. And while his peers seemed to take their promotions in stride, his own circumstances created so many stumbling blocks. How long did it take for him to feel like he had earned the title? And now that he was given an opportunity to sit on the Jedi Council, how could his input possibly carry the same insight and weight as that of the more experienced Jedi Masters? Wow, that is deeply relatable. So we know that he's filling this position on the council as a temporary replacement for Coleman Trebor, who dies at the Battle of Geonosis. Many people have kind of cycled into this position, we find, and nobody really knows if they're going to choose somebody or they're just going to have like a permanent rotating seat. But Obi-Wan is filling that seat right now, so he definitely feels like he doesn't belong there, nor does he feel like he like truly knows his own purpose and understand his own worth when it's not tied to his responsibility to Anakin.
Also, rest in peace, Coleman Trebor. Man, the guy got done dirty in the Geonosian arena. Just plops down, ready to fight, and Jango Fett just shoots him like twice, and he falls off the edge. My dude.
Yeah, I feel like
brutal.
The Geonosian arena, the Jedi were not at their mightiest. You know, like the Avengers are Earth's mightiest heroes. I'd be like, Jedi, galaxy's fourth most mightiest hero.
Coleman was the Dak of the prequel trilogy. I can take on the whole Empire myself. He's like, I'm gonna take on Jango Fett. Nope, didn't work. Sorry, buddy.
Not so much.
You are missed. But yeah, it's really interesting to see Obi-Wan in the spot where, you know, he has defeated a Sith Lord. He has trained a Padawan. And now he is having a seat on the council. And when you put it in the context too of Qui-Gon, Qui-Gon was once offered a seat on the Jedi Council, and he turned it down because he wanted to train Obi-Wan. Right? And so maybe there's a little bit of imposter syndrome there for Obi-Wan in the sense that Qui-Gon's one of the greatest men I've ever known. If he wasn't on the council, like why do I deserve to be, right? Like do you think there's something there maybe for Obi-Wan that he feels like he has sort of unfairly like usurped a status that Qui-Gon never attained in a way?
Yeah. Well, I think he reveres Qui-Gon so highly that he's like, how could I? When you lose someone, they are preserved in whatever, when you lose someone before their time, right? They're preserved in whatever age or experience that they had when they passed, and they never get older in your mind. And I think that Obi-Wan has that experience with Qui-Gon. Like as Obi-Wan ages, he's like, wait a second, I'm getting to experience more of life than Qui-Gon ever got to. And I'm getting to have all these accomplishments that Qui-Gon never was able to attain or never chose to attain. And like, how could I be better than Qui-Gon? I could never be better than Qui-Gon.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a vibe.
I also think there's one emotion that is driving Obi-Wan's feeling of imposter syndrome, and it becomes even clearer by the end of the story, and that's regret. He starts to see the man that Anakin is becoming, a new version of Anakin that is more authentic, more human. The relationship is turning from this sort of competition to it's referred to as a verbal one-upmanship.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan wonders, is Anakin like this because I tried too hard to live up to Qui-Gon's request to train him? And maybe he wouldn't have been as defiant and as much of himself if I had been more like Qui-Gon and less what I thought a Jedi mentor should be, right? Because when you think about it, like Qui-Gon was somebody who defied the order. He followed his moral compass. He kept in mind what was good and what was bad, and that's sort of how he lived his life. It wasn't always about the Force. Like, it was about like doing good. And that's why he thinks back to Pijal from Master and Apprentice, because in the end, Master and Apprentice,
yeah. I was like, heck yeah.
Obi-Wan's a very
reference.
rigid character living by the rules, and he's so like confused as to why Qui-Gon is being so defiant. And Obi-Wan recognizes in this book it's because he was following that North Star of good and wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so because his master was so rebellious, he felt the need to really live by the rules and live by the Jedi code. And maybe in doing that, he created a version of Qui-Gon in Anakin, right? So he's thinking, look, maybe if I was more like Qui-Gon, I would have created a version of myself that I became, where Anakin was more rigid and Anakin lived by the rules. So maybe I should have been more lax. Maybe I should have acted more like I master. Instead, I idealized this version of what a Jedi mentor should look like. And now look what I've trained. It's this guy who's a complete hot mess.
A helicopter parent, you know, like those helicopter parents, and then their kids go off to college and they become like party animals.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that.
He kind of did a little bit of that.
Yeah, we're talking helicopter parenting, empty nest syndrome.
Right.
Obi-Wan's a dad.
He's a dad. He panicked so much about like how Anakin was going to turn out, because of course there's this pressure of him being the chosen one, right? Like he's put so much pressure on himself to like do it right, do it by the book, that he didn't even realize that he was like being a helicopter parent, and that like Anakin just wanted to talk about his feelings, and that he ultimately rebelled and like made some really bad choices that he now can no longer come back from, because he is a shell of a man living in a Vader suit with mechanical breathing. And also there's a lot of pins that like go straight into his body.
He's not having a good time.
He killed younglings. It was bad choices were made because bad choices were made.
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought we decided we were not going to talk about Anakin. Okay, Sarah, get it together.
You know, much like Anakin and Obi-Wan's life, every single time we try to keep Anakin away, he finds a way back in. It's simply who Anakin Skywalker is. Those are Mike Chen's words.
It's really the Jurassic Park of it all. Life finds a way vibes. It's like Anakin finds a way,
finds a way back into the conversation, no matter what.
Right. With these relationships that are changing, and maybe Obi-Wan made some mistakes, debatable for Obi-Wan, but like we have to talk about Satine, Duchess Satine of Mandalore, right? A great ship, an excellent ship,
a tragic
very
ship.
iconic. Corky, the son of Obi-Wan, obviously.
Why do all of our favorite relationships end in death? Is my question.
I want to say that at least a little bit of it is the fact that this series has been going on for 45 years and they're like, well, we got to do a new story. What if we killed one of them off? You know, like there's that
So
little
sad.
bit of it there.
Sad. My heart can't take it anymore.
But we find throughout the story that like Obi-Wan really thinks about her a lot. Like a really decent amount. And he's kind of like wondering what's up with Anakin and Padme. And he kind of like wants to scold Anakin about it a little bit. He's like, do I talk to Anakin about it? Do I talk to Anakin about what I think is going on or whatever? And then he's like, maybe not. Because like, what if Anakin had found out about me and Satine? And like, he like smiles to himself.
Man.
But also just, there's just, that story is tragic because there's that whole line of like, if you had said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order. Like Obi-Wan put so much pressure on himself to stay in line that all he needed was permission from her that he never got explicitly because they were so committed to their own causes, which are valiant efforts. And he even recognizes that like they perhaps made both the right choice for themselves and the right choice for the cause that they were committed to. But he also wonders like what could have been, who would they be together if they weren't these two people. And I have to commend Mike Chen for like bringing this up and like talking about Satine because like it's clearly an important part of his life that wasn't a part of his life when the movies were made, but like when the layers are added, it's really wonderful for future stories to continue to use those elements to build the richness of these characters.
And Dex is the one to jab at Obi-Wan and bring up those feelings. They resurface because of his visit to Dex's diner. And he's like, oh, damn it, I feel it again. I feel all those feelings from before and, you know, the simple foolishness of impulsive youth. I remember it now. Oh, God, it's all coming back to me. And the fact that we learn, you know, she used to call you Ben for some reason. Reason. Oh, my God. And he goes by Ben and Obi-Wan Kenobi in the series. He no longer goes by Obi-Wan Kenobi. He just goes by, it's just Ben now. That's what he says to Tala, right? In episode 3. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going by the nickname Satine gave him.
Well, yeah.
That's so tragic.
Adds more, everybody's like, oh my God, did he name himself because of Ben Quadraneros? You know, like, but the is like, no, of course not. But this nickname with the origins of Satine makes it all the more tragic. In this essay, I will.
Why do you think he specifically chooses a name like Ben? Like, obviously, is it just to honor Satine? Is it just because it feels like the one part of himself that he can still latch onto and find some hope in? Is because he's like, you know, Satine was such a revered figure. She was somebody who defied all the odds and like no matter the impossibility of making a pacifist Mandalore, she tried anyways. So maybe he takes on that name because it reminds him of somebody who, again, defied the impossible. And he's living in an impossible galaxy right now of like hiding and he can't be himself.
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. I think it's like I needed to think of a quick name on the fly. Oh, wait, let me use my one nickname from the past. I think this is a piece of myself that I can perhaps latch onto and remind myself of, but also like that becomes his own cage, right? Because if that's the case, if every time somebody calls him Ben, he thinks of Satine and like Satine is dead. And it reminds him of his own pain and like the tragedy that he lives in right now, where he's lost Satine, he's lost Anakin, he's lost Qui-Gon. Maybe we should stop talking about both of these characters. This is a lot. And then he doesn't have a relationship with Luke because Owen won't let him, and it's going well for Obi-Wan, obviously.
You know, the other thing too is if he's trying to live a life where he's hiding his Jedi self in order to not get killed, maybe Ben is the idealized version of himself that would have left the Order to be with Satine. So what better persona to take on than the man who, if she had said the word, would have become Ben?
Holy moly! Really?
Whoa. So he takes on, he adopts that persona, because if he can be Ben, if he can get in his mind, I am Ben, that's who I am.
Jesus
I'm not
Christ,
I'm not
Brad.
a Jedi. He can really play the part. Doesn't that mess you up?
Do we really need to talk about Obi-Wan as an emissary? I feel like we talked a lot about that in the politics
We
section,
did,
because
yeah.
like I just am ready to be done with Obi-Wan. Let's talk about Obi-Wan and Anakin. Pain times 2.
No, I want to mention one final thing though with Satine.
Okay.
You mentioned that line though, and he does to some variation. Mike includes it in this book. Had they run off together, had he left the Jedi Order and she chosen a completely different life, what impact would they have had on the galaxy? And now, because they grew past their feelings and trusted in their paths, she led Mandalore in bold new directions, while he sat openly, newly appointed in the rarefied air of the Jedi Council. It took a little bit of time and discipline for both Obi-Wan and Satine to find their way. Could Anakin achieve the same maturity? Of all the questions impossible to answer over recent days, that proved it perhaps the most inscrutable. And inscrutable meant that he would be patient for now.
But Obi-Wan is saying that he made the right choice, but did he?
I think he has to convince himself that he made the right choice, or else he becomes like Anakin, where he is driven by that passion. He has to separate himself. And like, man, if we're really thinking about Cate Blanchett playing Satine within the Star Wars universe, man, he really missed his shot, because whew, my gosh, that would have been a power duo. Cate Blanchett, Ewan McGregor in universe. Oh my gosh.
Right.
It's just two hot people denying their feelings. I love the trope. Can't help it. Okay. Now we can talk about Obi-Wan and Anakin together.
Okay.
I
don't even know what we have to say at this point.
Well, folks, this is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. They're two partners who are now on equal footing. They've had barely any time to talk. The war has started. They're growing distant. Obi-Wan hasn't even asked about what happened on Tatooine.
Oof.
But here comes Anakin Skywalker to the rescue, midway through the book. And they're back to their selves. It's a balancing of roles that occurs. It's like we said earlier, no matter what, Anakin Skywalker always finds a way in, and that distance makes Obi-Wan appreciate the presence of Anakin and Anakin's resourcefulness, his stubbornness, his impulsiveness. Obi-Wan actually misses those things because he feels like Anakin and him always get the job done no matter what, and it's because they're such polar opposites in some ways, and it kind of makes their partnership work somehow, right? Always edging towards spinning out of control, but always making a happy landing, right? And so I think it took Obi-Wan time without Anakin there to see what he has lost. And what he had lost was Anakin Skywalker's presence, sort of removing that layer of Obi-Wan's very rigid thinking. Anakin's always pushing the boundaries for Obi-Wan, and I think Obi-Wan needs that. He's a little bit of a straight edge in some ways, right? And Obi-Wan's realizing that. He's like, gosh, I'm kind of not cool. I'm not a rule breaker, but Anakin is a rule breaker, and I kind of need that in my life to make it exciting and to make it work.
It's like you and I when it comes to spending. Yeah.
That's a really good...
don't buy that. And you're like, what if I bought it? What if?
Like, what if I bought...
Don't buy it.
What if I bought the statue of Max Rebo's ass cheeks? Like, what if I bought it?
I no words. No comments. No words.
I did it.
Anyway,
It's gonna go right here on the shelf, right behind me,
so I can see it every time that we record.
You can see those ass cheeks every single time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You're really thinking of me.
Sweet blue cheeks.
Okay, I actually have something really poignant to say that I thought about a lot that I want to get out. So
cool.
The natural place to do that is after completely derailing to talk about Max Rebo and the flippers and the butt crack. So what I would like to say, making it very serious again, is that these two, we talk about the rubber band, you stretch it, and it snaps, and they come back together. How Anakin finds a way. We talk about just these two characters who are learning and maybe having a better relationship now than they did as master and apprentice, as they have something that's a little bit looser, a little bit less defined by an adult and a child, as opposed to like two adults who can kind of navigate for themselves. But at the end of the day, Qui-Gon is the sun in their relationship in this story. And Obi-Wan and Anakin are the planets or the stars that orbit around him. They are connected forever through their commitment to him and the faith that he had in both of them. You know, Anakin is stuck in the Jedi Order, you know, following this path. Obi-Wan is stuck in the Jedi Order following this path and raising Anakin, even at a time when he didn't feel like he was ready to do that. And they both are glued together because Qui-Gon Jinn, for even the little time that he had knowing Anakin, or that they had knowing each other, believed in him so deeply that he gave him another life. And I think that it's a really interesting idea. And you just kind of like think about like these two guys and the fact that they're brothers. You know, we see a lot of the master and apprentice relationship as like a parent and a child. And we definitely see that for Obi-Wan and Anakin. But at the end of the day, they're so close in age, much like Vernestra and Imri in the High Republic, that they are more friends, they are more family than they are somebody who is clearly the capital A adult and somebody who is the capital C child in that sort of parenting relationship. And so they're stuck together no matter what they do, which is why we see them in Kenobi having the rematch of the century, which is why they get back together in, you know, A New Hope, and they have that battle, and Obi-Wan closes his eyes and, you know, like imagines the Force in a new way in his life.
And who is Obi-Wan trying to constantly reach out to in the series? Qui-Gon Jinn.
Qui-Gon.
Right? It's all connected. Qui-Gon is the key
He's the glue.
to all of this.
He's the glue.
Yes.
You know what? What if we had a shirt that said
Oh my
that? What if we
gosh.
just made shirts that Qui-Gon is the key to all of
Super
this?
Yaki, do it.
Call it up Super Yaki, or we'll call up Brian Balance and be like, Brian, it's your time.
I honestly think like this is my favorite part of the book, is like recontextualizing this relationship to be, it is about Qui-Gon. It's about Qui-Gon's faith in each of them. Like that's what keeps driving them together. It's Qui-Gon's dying wish, train the boy, and Obi-Wan feels this obligation, and Anakin feels the weight of Qui-Gon's expectations of like, you know, you have this really high midichlorian count, you are the chosen one, I'm putting all my eggs in your basket. Qui-Gon brought Anakin to the council to say like, this boy, I know he is like 9 or 10, we have to train him, I believe in him, like he deserves to be here, right? And so that puts a lot of pressure on Anakin. And it's why when he loses Qui-Gon, he spends those first days as a Padawan so lonely and so sad. It's because he's like, the one person who brought me here and believed in me, I kind of feel lost. I feel like, is anybody going to believe in me the way that he did? Because clearly he had my back. Like he doesn't really know Obi-Wan or trust Obi-Wan to that same degree. And he's had to build that over time. And it sucks too when you think about how Obi-Wan has closed himself off to Anakin in many ways because of that rigidity with adhering to the Jedi code, right? And not really being that lax non-helicopter parent that we've talked about, right? And I think there was a turning point for Obi-Wan, and we might have referenced this earlier, but when Anakin is putting his faith in Mill and Obi-Wan sees Qui-Gon's teachings reflected in that behavior, the fact that Anakin's more guided by caring for people as opposed to his faith in the Force. And Obi-Wan thinks to himself, quote, that insight required a certain maturity that hadn't existed in him as a Padawan, or maybe Obi-Wan simply hadn't let himself see it before. After so many years of self-doubt and petty gripes, Obi-Wan found himself starting to truly recognize Qui-Gon's faith in Anakin. And so that key line is like, after so many years of self-doubt and petty gripes, I think that's where the regret for Obi-Wan comes in. He's regretting all the time that he's wasted with Anakin, not seeing him as like the amazing potential flower he could blossom into. He's seen him as like one thing and one thing only, and he's boxed him into this like very rebellious teenager who doesn't listen, rather than seeing all the qualities that Qui-Gon has seen, right? And so I think he's seeing it a little too late. And I think that's why Anakin, who knows Obi-Wan's not seeing those things in him, goes to somebody like Palpatine. Palpatine sees those things in Anakin instead. And it's why he puts so much confidence in Palpatine, and he confides in him like a father almost. In some other ways, he sees Obi-Wan as a father as well. It's like he has two dads, right? And one's just better at listening, and one will give him anything that he wants, right? This is a thesis statement of Brotherhood, right?
Yes, I have nothing more to add. In this essay, we did. While we could talk about Qui-Gon probably all day, and we would call up all of our friends to join in this Qui-Gon conversation, got Brian on speed dial, we should probably hop into our odds and ends, because there were some fun little moments to enjoy that didn't quite fit into the rest of our conversation here that we should absolutely take the time to highlight. And would you like to go back and forth on this one, Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you start with the first one?
Okay, so I only have a few because we kind of hit on some of mine earlier. I had speeder racetracks, I had the nickname origins for Ben, and I had Grand Theta of Judgment, just because I thought that was a great name. But my first real one that we haven't talked about yet is Anakin's love language, which is gifts.
Ooh,
gifts.
I like gifts.
Yeah, page 44. Anakin gives Padme his Padawan braid and a quote disc-shaped gold pendant.
What a dork.
I have to say, I'm glad that we as a society broadly do not give each other locks of our hair anymore. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, that was really nice of him. But I'm also like, because I have a couple of like hairs from my dog that passed away a long time ago. I don't really have them in a special spot, but like I know that I have them. But like, you know, because they're gone now. But I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a little weird to give like, here, I cut a piece of my hair off for you. It's my dead skin cells. You're welcome.
Oh man. I mean, Anakin could have come up with anything better. I think in Queen's Hope, he gives Padme 3PO. That's like a little better of a gift, right? So
I mean, that's a much better
here's
gift.
this protocol droid
swap-a-roo of droids.
Never stops talking. So have fun.
You know what? We're not crapping on C-3PO in this
I love
episode.
3PO.
I will not allow it. I love 3PO.
No, I do.
He is my etiquette king.
No, he's great. But he's very eccentric.
Did you know he's fluent? He's fluent in over 6 million forms of communication.
I did not know that.
I am not. So I have to respect him for that.
All right. So my first odds and ends is High Republic connections. We see a couple here. I mentioned how Mill goes to Valo, but there's also Padme and Anakin, speaking of which, they're sitting on some rusty crates, quote, something that may have even been in the very location since the days of the High Republic. Did things even change down here? You know, so Anakin is acknowledging in his own thoughts the High Republic era. I think that's very interesting that in universe it's referred to as the High Republic era as well.
Oh, yeah.
And in Dex's Diner, this is maybe a connection that I drew myself. But Obi-Wan says, your food is always better than the temple refectories, though don't tell Master Yoda I said that. So to me, I took that as canon that Master Yoda still bakes, first introduced by Daniel Jose Older. So,
gosh.
Yeah, I take that as canon. Yoda is still baking in the prequel trilogy. Yoda's like, hey, let go of everything you fear to lose. By the way, BRB, I'm going to go bake some cakes right now. So
you're not wrong. Okay. My next one is page 104, the quote, sudden strike on Braca.
Oh.
My ears just perk up whenever I get a Jedi Fallen Order reference. And I think there's one earlier in the book where it's like whatever species Cal's master is, and I just can't think of his name right now. It's late. But there's like in the little red-headed apprentice, and I was like pointing.
You're like, oh my God.
And I don't know if that's this book, but I was like, I couldn't find a note for it that I had written, but I was like pointing like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Cal Kestis in the hallway.
It's like, that's my boy.
Oh my gosh. Should we tell him not to go to Braca? Oh, jeez. Don't go.
They really, yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
So my next odds and ends is Dooku Sass. We didn't talk a lot about Dooku or really Ventress in this book. Although I will say like Ventress is an amazing character, and I'm so glad we got her in universe introduction finally. Canonically, that I should say. Dooku at one point in the beginning of the book says, Master Kenobi, I believe the last time we saw each other, you and your apprentice tried to murder me. Obi-Wan considered reminding everyone that just prior to that, Dooku tried executing him, Anakin, and Senator Amidala in a giant Geonosian arena. However, that seems politically unwise given the delicacy of the moment. Oh, I think that's just so funny. He's like, okay, all right. Thanks, Dooku. Thanks for adding me, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. This was also mentioned kind of and we talked about it earlier, but I just would like to bring it up for a different point. But Master Windu can go on for hours about shatter points, but perhaps the lack of empathy is his very own shatter point. That's just shatter points in canon, my friends.
Yeah.
Shatter points in canon. I feel like this is propaganda to get me to read Shatterpoint.
We should read
by Matthew Stover.
Shatterpoint.
We should. We both have it. We just haven't read it. But like, yeah, I see your propaganda and I tell you it's working.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite odds and ends. Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars micro series continues to have its moment in the sun.
So much fun.
And I love how Mike posted a whole thread about Easter eggs from the book, and he actually mentioned this specifically. He said, quote, "My unofficial take on Genndy is that it's like a made-for-HoloNet anime dramatization of the war, basically stylized propaganda. Somewhere underneath is the bones of truth, just like any docudrama movie or show." I love how he sees the microseries. I think that's such a fascinating way to envision it, but I do love how he is pulling in moments from the microseries. So first we have Ki-Adi-Mundi, who has scars that are still healing on his cheek from his recent encounter with General Grievous, which we know in the microseries, Ki-Adi-Mundi fights General Grievous alongside so many other Jedi, and that's the first time we see Grievous ever in any form.
Heyo.
Really. Man, that was a wild time in the early 2000s when Grievous came on screen before Revenge of the Sith. You're like, oh my God, who is this guy?
I love him.
We have Anakin disobeying Mace's orders again, but he says that in all the challenges Mace has faced down recently, from taking down Jango Fett with a single lightsaber swipe to staring down an overwhelming wave of super battle droids on Dantooine. So that's the other episode when he does the cool thing that you love, Sarah, where he pulls out all the screws.
I love it so much. It literally just
yeah,
crumble.
Amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's just like the best.
And last here, which I know there's a bunch of other ones, I'm not going to go through all of them, but something I loved was Anakin when they're in like the sewer pipe drainage place and he senses Ventress. He tells Mill, something's not right, which are the same words that he tells the clone troopers when he fights Ventress on Yavin in the micro series. And it's so funny in the micro series because like all the troopers are dying and like they're all like getting mysteriously disappearing, and Anakin's like, something's not right here. I want to mention my next odds and ends, which is coffee. Obi-Wan takes his calf straight black, Anakin with a single shot of cream. No wonder Obi-Wan's so uptight. He is drinking straight black calf. Man, you got to get some creamer in there. Sugar, spice, everything nice. Come on.
My next one is just like a delicious paragraph on 195 if anybody wants to read along. That was the problem with making it up as you went along. Most of the practical logistics simply never came up. Obi-Wan had plans built upon strategies, built upon guidelines, and even when he had to come up with something on the fly. Padme worked much in the same way, and Chancellor Palpatine, well, he wouldn't have gotten to where he was today if he hadn't set up his plans in advance.
Yikes.
That's it. That's a tweet. Brad, you go next.
So at one point when Anakin is watching over the younglings, he's with Durbin Wenherd, who is another Jedi. I'm probably butchering that name. But this Jedi has two Shoto blades, short Shoto blades that she uses, and she's showing the Padawans, the younglings, her like dagger-like slicing and acrobatics. Ahsoka Tano uses Shoto blades. I thought that was a nice little tidbit. Maybe a little bit of foreshadowing. There's this warrior with Anakin who's going to fight like Ahsoka, and they're together for a hot minute. So yeah, thought that was pretty cool.
Yep, absolutely. I was like, wait, this rings a bell. So this next one is another Anakin and Padme one, where Padme is eating this Franicon.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a burrito of sorts that's typically found on desert planets and prepared in a makeshift oven that's dug into the ground. It's like meats and veggies
cool.
served in a bread-like wrap. It's a burrito of sorts, or like a pita.
I want one.
And this is something that Anakin used to have as like a child on Tatooine. So he's like trying it here and he's like, it's almost right. But Padme found out about this one because, quote, people in the government know where the good food is. They talk. And once I heard Bail Organa compare it to a meat griller on a desert world, and I thought of you, which triggers memories of Padme, which triggers old memories for Anakin, which Padme's apologetic about. But he says those are good memories, and this is a new memory with you It's perfect, which
What a
is
good
soft
moment.
and nice.
What a good moment.
See it again, and then they're like, "Oh, Padme really cares." You know, she's like, "Let me find this thing from your childhood that I can remind you of, and hopefully bring you a good memory of a food you enjoyed." That's sweet. Okay, next one.
I'm really happy you included the Bail mention, the only Bail mention of this book in your odds and
Bail
ends,
Organa.
because that's like very on brand for you.
Bail Organa.
Also, Bail Organa, a man of literally good food tastes. Canon. He's going all across Coruscant. You know, like the chef show with Jon Favreau. Like, I want the chef show with Bail Organa, and he's just like going around Coruscant, like trying all the different food restaurants.
Stop.
And he's like cooking food and stuff. Yeah,
Stop
be
it.
pretty cool. He's got like a little food truck. Bail's Pale. I would love it. Anyways,
that's not the best name we could come up with. I'm certain.
I'm trying. I'm really trying. I'm really trying here.
Your turn. It's your turn. Do a no one.
Quinlan Vos appears in chapter 11. I thought that was pretty cool. Quinlan Vos is somebody who has been talked about recently for reasons I will not mention here in case you have not watched certain things that are happening in the Star Wars.
I will. Quinlan is mentioned in Obi-Wan episode 3.
Okay. Well, you know what? It's been out for a week, folks. You got it. Actually, 2 weeks by this point. But thought that was cool. Thought it was cool.
My last one here is a mullet shout out. Anakin is like thinking about how to change his hair now that he's no longer beholden to the Padawan braid. And he's like, maybe I'll grow it out. Have you seen how Obi-Wan hair flows in the back? And she's like, no, please, anything but that. And I think that's just a hilarious mullet reference.
Yeah. And our last odds and ends is sand. It gets everywhere. Of course it does. I really love how Mike Chen recontextualizes that line of like, you know, I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and gets everywhere. And I think, you know, despite the meme of it all, this really boils down to a conversation between Anakin and Padme. And, you know, Padme tells him that she understands why he hated sand so much after spending a few days on Tatooine. And, you know, she recognizes that they come from different places and it informs so much of how they see the galaxy. And, you know, for Anakin, he associates sand with being a slave and losing his mother, right? And so I think it goes a little bit deeper than just like a really cheesy throwaway line that, you know, we meme to the point,
100%.
meme to the point of exhaustion. It really says something about Anakin. And for Anakin, he thinks about that trip with Padme, and he's like, you know, it's really the only good thing that's ever happened regarding sand is like my association with Padme being there is like the one of the few good memories I have outside of, you know, my memories with my mother. But aside from that, he's getting sand in his hand and he's like, see, no one believes me when I say it gets everywhere. It's everywhere. It's like in my hand joint. I can't move my hand. So I thought that was kind of funny how he did say the line, it gets everywhere. I was like, yes, got to have an Attack of the Clones sequel book with that in it. Of course.
Indeed. Perhaps. Yes, indeed.
Okay, Thrawn.
Different character, but I really felt the word indeed in that moment.
Well, those are our odds and ends. So we thought there were quite a few of them in this book that were amazing. I will say we didn't talk a lot about Dexter Jettster, but
like
amazing. Like
he could get its own episode.
But now that we're talking about him, I just quick shout out. He was a really cool information broker. I thought that was amazing.
Oh my, that's the one odds and ends I forgot. He was like he was the most known information broker across the Corps.
Yeah.
I was like, king, okay.
So cool.
Everybody wants a piece of that 6-layer cake, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like everybody's like, let me stop by the Cocoa District on Coruscant where I can get to the diner and go like trade some information with Dexter Jettster.
He's eating cake for dinner.
Eat some 6-layer cake.
You know, like I love that. I love that for him so much. He's like, you know, I need protein, but I also need a lot of cake. So like,
as do
naturally,
us all.
yeah.
As do us all.
So with that said, we're going to give our final thoughts on Brotherhood. Sarah, take it away. What are your final thoughts on this book?
My final thoughts are that this book is excellent. This book should be read by all. And that I want more prequel books.
Yeah.
Mike Chen supremacy. Mike Chen king. I had no thoughts anymore. Like I just genuinely think he's a great writer. And this book is great. And I want to read more of his version of Star Wars.
I echo everything you said. This book is a love letter to the prequel era. It contains so much in it. I mean, we've really talked about it ad nauseum at this point. It's brilliant. It's so well written. It recontextualizes a movie that's 20 years old, and recontextualizes so much beyond just Attack of the Clones. And it is one of my new favorite Star Wars books. Honestly, it's that good. So many layers, like that cake from Dex's Diner.
Like that cake.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And with that, I have 2 quotes for you, Brad and listeners. The first, this was Skywalker and Kenobi as they should be. A team built on emotion and intellect, bravado and control, fire and ice. And despite no longer having the formal bond of master and apprentice, they would always be connected. In fact, they were better this way. Qui-Gon Jinn would have agreed. Anakin was certain of it. And finally, the final lines of the book. There stood Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, brothers in arms of the Jedi Order, and together they were unstoppable.
Well, with that, what a way to end on 2 powerful quotes about this Brotherhood that we love so dearly. I had a lot of fun talking about Brotherhood. I cannot wait for more Obi-Wan Kenobi books. I cannot wait for Padawan. That's going to be such a good time, I'm sure. Until then, if you want to know everything that's happening here at Friends of the Force, including our series, The Kenobi Keynote, where we are talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi every single week, make sure to be following us on Twitter and Instagram to get all the latest updates. Follow the show wherever you listen to the podcast so it drops right into your feed every time there's a new episode. And if you would be so kind, please leave us a 5-star written review because it helps other folks find the show and join the Star Wars discussion. And it makes us feel really good. And we know that we're doing a good job here. So that's always a nice perk.
Creative people need positive feedback because just like Obi-Wan Kenobi, they suffer from imposter syndrome.
If there's anything that you've learned, we have it. We have it too, Obi-Wan. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay.
Obi-Wan, he's just like us. And we have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1, and we are so immensely grateful for all of our patrons. They are Amy, Anna, Brian with an I, Brian with a Y, Carol, Cheryl, Clay, Danny, Davis, Dylan, Donnie, Deborah, Elegy, Huang, Jen, Knights of Ren, Levi, Leanne, Lindsay, Lucy, Luke, Randy, Rob, Saber Bouquet, Sky Talkers, Travis, and T. And we will be talking about the Obi-Wan comic over on our Patreon Force Pull List series as well. So if you're interested in that, that will be there.
Yeah. Lots of Kenobi to go around. Simply too much Kenobi. But that's never a bad problem to have.
Not enough. No, not too much Kenobi. Don't say that. Don't make them take Kenobi away from us. We want him.
Kenobi is here to stay, and we cannot wait to talk more about him. So, thank you everybody for listening to this episode. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Happy Pride. Bye.